Yes, hello everybody. It is Friday, and digging out on some Supertramp. I think probably one of the most underappreciated bands out there. But it's okay because it's all rock and roll, and I'm just glad that I was born when I was born and got to experience it front and center. I mean, how freaking far out! And many of you did the same. I tell you, you know. They say everything goes in a cycle. Well, I don't know when the last cycle when rock and roll was invented, but I bet you they were doing the same thing we did. And it's now.
Well, I don't know when the
There
last.
we go. I knew that was going to happen. Little 30-second delay between you and me, as they say in real time. Hello, everyone. How are you? Welcome. May I just invoke favor upon you. Nothing missing, nothing broken be in your life. Hello, Robin. Good to see you. And Kent, good to see you. Nina the Mystic, good to see you. Dangerously Simple. I love that. How are you doing? Brent, hadn't seen you before. Hello. Valerie, and David, and let's see, Mojo. I love that. Hey, Nick, how are you doing? Going to get Nick on here. Sarah, Twisted Isby, so good to see you. David Barry, much love, my friend. And let's see, think agape love always and forever. Love that. Ricardo, thank you. Hillary, good to see you. Nicholas, man, Susie Q, hello, Claire. There's a song about you. Robert, good to see you. Merritt, hello. Hello, Lois. Good to see you. How are you doing, my dear? And well, lots of people here. And so, on top of everything else, that in putting this presentation together, because literally, I don't know if you've ever built PowerPoint presentations, you literally have to build the slides as they do. And back in the day, way back in the day, when we didn't have PowerPoint, you, for doing a presentation that we take for granted today, would have been very expensive. I worked for a company that actually did slideshows, multi-cameras, the whole bit. Yeah. I talk about it and I'm going, gee, well, are we just back in the Stone Age? Depends on what your point of view is. Anyway, I digress. So as you literally get, your mind will literally form a visual of the characters and that which you're writing. And next week, we're going to get into the battle. Oh, folks, you don't want to miss the battle. The battle took place, the 100,000 giant war took place at the very second the flood started. And the battlefield had to be something, the continents are not the same back then. I mean, everything was changed. And folks, it's, I'd say in over 50 years of listening, reading, studying these stories, you've most of all of us who come out of certain belief systems realize that, well, what you were taught isn't true. But in any case, you literally formed your belief system believing that only 6, 7, or 8 people survived this event. It's absurd, but, that was what you had to believe it in order for the story to have foundation. Because if it wasn't, then someone's jacking with the story and why. Anyway, I've been going back. I've had this book for decades, and this is the story of the two Babylons, in which it says, or the papal worship proved to be the worship of Nimrod. Well, my wife and I were talking last night, and we talked and we said, I don't remember Nimrod being a giant. I guess he was a Nephilim. I don't know. Or maybe he was Rephaim. And actually listen to the Hebrew pronunciation of that. Very interesting word, Rephaim. Rephaim. I love that. But we got into the discussion. Well, then the books that most people have been raised on in belief systems gives a story. And that's the problem, folks. When you only have one side of the story, what you have is you don't have free thought. You don't have choice. That's totalitarian. Communism. Now, only one side of the story allowed. Anything else, and that's what we've lived with for thousands and thousands of years. And so we only had one side of the story. And when the other side of the story, because naturally there has to be, you can't have a belief system that you believe in the duality, but have an exemption where there's only one. No, doesn't work that way. So let me just invoke favor upon everybody. Nothing missing, nothing broken in your lives. I haven't forgotten about it. And happy birthday, everyone. So what we're about to experience is and learn, I think for the first time I went out there and looked at this, I can't find another list that's going to be as extensive as this. So let's get right into it, because I really don't, the story is better than having me just simply give here a monologue. The Men of Renown. I've heard this term again most of my life. Had no idea who, what, where. I just knew it was part of these giants, and the story. And I mean, the problem when you have lack of information, ignorance is born. And once ignorance is born and gets into the belief system, well, the belief system no longer has credibility. So think about this. I want to make two clarifications on something. Well, not clarifications, thoughts. Number one, Baal literally means Lord. It's a title. It's a position. Royalty, granted, and it can be a position of rulership. So you could literally say Lord of the earth, Lord of the moon, Lord of the sun, Lord of the stars, and celestial bodies. It would be just as accurate, which brings a lot into that. I mean, Lord is used in every religion. And you could reverse that and say, well, when you say, for instance, Lord Jesus, you could say Baal Jesus. It's what it is. Sometimes people, they want to have a door that only swings one way when they on their belief systems, but in the big picture, they want a door that swings both ways, and you can't have that. Also, here's a thought for everybody. A couple of weeks ago, about a month ago, we were doing studies into reincarnations, reading stories, particular remarkable stories of children and their recounts of previous lives. So here's my question. Did these men of renown, I mean, they called it men, I didn't. So that means that's a conundrum there. I mean, you can't believe the cockamamie story about some angel coming down and getting a hard on. I mean, come on. It's absurd in its absurdity. So we have a mystery here. Again, we don't know. This book has taught us one thing. Our past isn't anything like any of us been taught. So, could they be reincarnated? I mean, if reincarnation works for us, and they're part of us, or we were part of them, or somewhere in between, or somewhere outside, I mean, if we believe in this thing called reincarnation, life after death, they did. Certainly, it's going to be established how much they did. So here's the question for comments in the chat room. So does giants have the same ability for reincarnation? And this brings up a really interesting question in the whole thesis of, I should say theosis, of reincarnation in the belief system. What, are we so bigoted, racist, that we think it's only sapiens that can reincarnate? Only sapiens that have a soul? Only sapiens that will have an afterlife? How arrogant is that? But hey, that's who we are, and that's how we hang. But nevertheless, I think about all the metaphysical stuff I've read and all the beliefs and associated positive energies and what have you, and I'm going, but hey, I dig positive energy, but what about these dudes? Where did they reincarnate into? Holy crapola. Let's get in with this. All right. We ended with Tarshan, and so we'll pick up with him, and we'll get right into it. So these are the legends. All the legends of giants, and boy, I mean, I could get into potions, witchcraft, conjuring, telepathic communication, move-ins, metamorphing, shape-shifting, all going to be here. All going to be here. So Tarshan, who hunted in the great waters, I interpret that as the oceans, and tamed Leviathan. Tarshan, blood servant and warden of the blood pits. I like some of the comments on this one yesterday. Of Baal of the earth. Tarshan, and you could say again, Lord of the earth. And then let me just finish on that, by the way. So if we have a Lord, who the freak is the big one? Nowhere is the, and it's implied. And boy, if this bigger one is in the mindset of these, ay. All right. Tarshan, who killed the circumcised Nephilim on the field of battle by crushing skulls with hammers. Only imagine. Remember, these are 25, 30, 40-foot beings. Figure what kind of hammer they're carrying for a weapon. Tarshan, who plundered Nimrod's stores and took all of his smaller selves and livestock. Tarshan, whose face had been scarred by a mighty beast. Tarshan, who used the Dark Ones to read the minds and hearts of others. Tarshan's army was 500 giants. So each one of these men of renown, that's why they're known as renown, had an army with them. And this is the gathering of the 100,000 giant war. This is Giron the Heavy, whose fourth and final battle was the 100,000 giant war. Each war Giron fought had torn his face so severely that he had 3 different faces. Okay, I think I can get the idea of where a two-face come from. I don't know. Now I can see where thrice-face. Geron, who was oppressed by his dark ones. Again, these dark ones. Wow. And had been rendered mute. Geron, who served Mot in the open. Geron, who was stubborn, rebellious, a glutton, and a drunkard. Folks, I mean, these cats are already the bad of the bad. So when you're the bad of the bad, and they're calling you rebellious, a drunkard, a glutton, man, oh man, we could never reach the mark. Giron, who continued to swing the driver and chaser, I showed you a picture of what that looked like, mightily after his head had been severed in battle. Giron's army was 500 giants. Well, he went down a swinging and kept on a swinging, apparently. We had chickens when I was growing up, and, you know, it's true. You ever seen a chicken run around with his head chopped off? Yeah, it happens. Anyway, so yeah, he got anyway, too bad. This is Athos. Athos the climber who climbed the mountains until the air thinned and cold as he searched for new lands. Athos, soothsayer for Baal of the stars and celestial bodies. Athos, who had foretold the circumcision of Nimrod and the 100,000 war. The thing that I got in this thing, these guys were psychic. They had psychic powers that today, as I said, we interpretate that as superpowers. Athos, who was strong and of good courage for Baal of the stars and celestial bodies, possessed and never forsook. Athos, who visage changed when the dark ones were upon him. It means his whole image changed. Athos, who made armor out of the bones of the Nephilim and the great beast of old. Let your imagination run wild on that one. Athos, who had eyes of certain death, and this is a term they use. We use the nomenclature, girl, you look like death all over. Kind of that same type of idiom we use today. They had this one here. These men of renown, these giants, they had eyes of certain death. So it's very clear to me as I have write this down, and it's almost, again, you're reading, not only the obit, but you're reading the CV of their lives. And they were all highly psychic, highly, definitely possessing telepathy, telekinesis, the whole bit. His army was 500 giants. Yuval. Now, we all know, let me get this. Yuval here. This is the book of Lamech of Cain. And this is the same Yuval in here that King Og is talking about. This character is, this one brings up E.T. all over. All right. Yuval the Gray. Gandor the Gray, right? Yeah, anyway. Father of Og's deceased wife, Lesta. Yuval was the commander of elephants and great scaled beasts. Excuse me. We know that that's Leviathan. Why? Well, because we got him in over here. That's what made Lamech so feared by other smaller selves. They just didn't call us smaller selves in there. Yuval was a giant who befriended Lamech and then taught him how to subdue Leviathan. And when Leviathan comes out of the water, Leviathan becomes a dragon. Anyway, so those of you who didn't catch that, that's the deal. Yuval had fallen from the skies like lightning at the beginning. So this is amazing. We get an idea from the other giants that they didn't come from the sky. We know where part of the globe they came from. But Yuval is something different here. It said that he came like lightning down from the sky. Folks, there is so many gold nuggets. Hell, they're not nuggets. These are freaking boulders in this writing. Yuval, who conversed with the bright ones. Well, we know what the dark ones are. Who are the bright ones? I mean, who are they? they seem to be able to coexist in a reality where there's dark, there's white, light, black, white, evil, good. Yuval, whose heart broke when the moonchild was lost. So this man had great compassion, this giant did. Empathy. That's intelligence. That's sentience. Yuval, who sacrificed to gods we did not know. So this guy is a true mystery. Yuval, who died in combat after killing many while under the control of the Dark Ones. Now, that's something we didn't read over here in the other book. So it's like they allowed themselves to be possessed. Come on in. Yuval's army was 5,000 giants, one of the larger armies. Yuval. You know, you could do studies on these cats just on them alone. This is Ark Rut. Ark Rut, the Rephaim, who sharpened his fingernails. I don't like the sound of that. Ark Rut, who when connected, this is this connecting telepathically, became a lion. That's shape-shifting. That's rearranging matter. Ark Rut, whose floating beast tore at the groins of the circumcised Nephilim. I have no idea what type of bird I guess that would be. Carrion. Ark Rut, who wore the skins and faces of the many Nephilim he killed. Well, I mean, come on, you know, they're graphic artists who I'd love to be able to, as this gets out there. I mean, I think this is probably going to be one of the first, again, going through individually these great men of renown that even the Bible gives glorification to. So you figure it out. Ark Rut, servant of Baal of the stars and celestial bodies. Ark Rut, whose arrows were drunk with blood and whose sword longed to devour flesh. Ark Rut, whose braided beard grew past his knees. Ark Rut's army was 500 giants. Noth, and I call this Panov. Panov, the black Rephaim, from the hot lands of elsewhere. Don't know where elsewhere is, but wherever elsewhere is, it's damn hot. Panov, who like Yuval, conversed with the bright ones. Panov, who sacrificed to gods we did not know. Panov, who spoke the incantation to raise the dead. I don't know how you want to define that. I mean, obviously, raising the dead is not that big of a deal for either a god or a giant, because they were doing this with quite frequency. Panov, who opened his soul to the dark ones completely, and whose eyes darkened because of it. I immediately thought about the legend of the dark-eyed children, the dark-eyed people, who, if they show up on your doorstep, don't answer the freaking door. That's all I'll say about that. Because if you got black eyes, something else is in there. Panov, who heaped disaster upon the circumcised Nephilim and dashed their skulls upon the stones in the field. Panov, who had eyes of certain death. Well, hell, if they're already black, I mean, what more do you need to say that that dude ain't going to be around long? His army was 1,000 giants. Youcussed, the Blackruffian from the hot lands of elsewhere. Well, again, they must have traveled up together. Youcussed, who was driven by the dark ones that visibly rested upon his shoulder. I mean, can you imagine that? Youcussed, who could call down fire from heaven from Baal of the sun. You could say Lord of the sun. Youcussed, who took off his sandals to question Baal of the sun, was not struck dead. All right, where have we heard that before? Remove your sandals, for you stand upon holy ground. Damn, sounds like the Moses story to me, doesn't it? Didn't Moses also question the Lord God and was not struck down? I'm just saying. Youcussed, whose hair was thick and looked like ropes do. Youcussed, who killed 50 circumcised Nephilim with the skull of a great beast before he died. Youcussed had eyes of certain death, and his army was 1,000 giants. Argue, the Footbreaker, holy crap, whose white hair shone under Baal of the sun. Argue, who fought mightily with driver and chaser and crippled many. Well, if he liked to break feet, I would guess so. Argue, who had to be chained to a stone pillar when under the power of the dark ones because of his powerful strength. Is this where we get the stories of, those who have been possessed, that, they suddenly take on super strength? Listen, I've known people who've worked what they used to call the insane asylums. I mean, this is true. Something gets into even us that the normal person can't restrain. I told you the story of myself when they tried to put me under and put that camera down my throat. Wasn't going to go for it. And I was consciously out. Apparently my body wasn't. Argu, who prophesied Og's victory in the 100,000 giant war. Argu, who left nothing undone of all that the Dark Ones commanded him. Now, I mean, it seems like there is an exchange, a symbiotic relationship here, give and take, I don't know. His army was 500 giants. Vetus, whose arms swung violently and who wrapped his fist in chains. Vetus, who fasted and prayed before Baal of the moon with Og during the death watch of the moon child. Vetus, whose dark ones would enter his enemy and then return to tell him what the enemy was planning. Now, of all the possessions that I have studied, listened to, all the war stories that I like World War II history. I don't know why. It's just something that, anyway, I never heard of conjuring or having dark ones, whatever they may be. And I think many of us have our own idea of who and what dark ones are. But imagine this, using them as a spy. If the CIA ever gets a hold of this, I'll guarantee you they're going to start looking into, well, what were they doing here? This is pretty incredible. Vetus, who had eaten 200 humans in one sitting. Oh, smaller cells. Vetus took violent means to follow Baal of the moon, brutally walking in all his ways. He had the eyes of certain death as well, and his army was 500. I don't know what brutally could be interpreted. I mean, again, these are badasses to begin with. Briars, the strong giant, who worked in the fields and harvested. So he was a farmer. Briars, worshiper of Baal of the earth, and a recipient of Baal's blessing. I don't know. What I've read of Baal so far, it gives you pause for cause, or cause for pause, however you want to phrase that. What does it mean for a deity to bless you? I guess it's again a matter of interpretation. Briars, who commanded many dark ones to enter the circumcised Nephilim's armies and confuse their ways. Briars, who dug a tunnel into Nimrod's kingdom. So it shows that they had the knowledge to dig tunnels. Just saying. Briars, who built an incredible altar to Baal of the earth that was a witness between him and the Dark Ones, so that none in Og's kingdom could say, we have no part in Baal of the earth. Briars' army was 3,000 giants. Well, all I got to say, that would be on the same level of saying, Wayne, Lucifer is blessing you. How do you receive that? Do I receive that? How would it be for you, David? Satan is blessing you. Hey, how do you take that? Good, I hope. This is Cocteau, the Blackruffian from the hot lands of elsewhere. Well, all right, this is another one. Cocteau, who strikes pulverized boulders and who pounded his fist inside and through his enemies. Okay, I'm still sitting here stunned on that one. Cocteau, worshiper of gods we did not know. Cocteau, who had torn 20 circumcised Nephilim apart with his bare hands. That's a bad dude, man. Cocteau, a violent giant, no kidding, whose fury none could reason with. Cocteau, who put a trumpet in, now folks, dig this, in the hand of every giant in his army. Cocteau said, when I blow the beast's horn, then you blow the trumpets on every side of the camp, then scream. The battle belongs to Og. In doing so, the Nephilim were confused by the horn blast and yelling, and the Nephilim greatly feared Cocteau and his army. Cocteau, who also had the eyes of death, and his army was 2,000 giants. Now, folks, that's Jericho all over. This is, I don't know, nearly 1,000 years or so after the flood. Now, this is word for word for it. Again, many of you are seeing other such similarities. This is Gyges of curved limbs. Gyges, who had been buried from the neck down to straighten his curved limbs at childhood. Sounds like spinal bifida, potentially polio. Yeah. Gyges, builder of the high places and secret worshiper of Mot. Well, we know who Mot is. Gyris, who was protected by the dark ones that circled him in black flames. You see, black flames do exist. Gyris, who conjured and sent a powerful dark one of ill will into the Nephilim camp. He was captured and straightened till he died by the circumcised Nephilim. In other words, they pulled him apart. But interesting that he could send a dark one of ill will. I can only imagine how that could manifest. And again, these are giants, not little people like us. I don't know. Talo. Talo, the simple giant. Talo, who had his head wounded as a child. I think someone may have dropped him on his head or whatever. Talo, whose forehead was a wall, but whose skull was sunken. Talo, who opened himself completely to the dark ones and was rarely in control of himself. Wow. Talo, who spoke to all with the mind and voice of the dark one, and served Baal of the earth. Talo, who allowed no razor to come near his head or face. His army was 425 giants. Again, he didn't have the eyes of death, so we can only imply by what's being written here that he didn't have the eyes of death, and he survived. Raka. Raka, the empty head. Raka, whose dark ones completely controlled him. Raka, who was unpredictable with the axe, driver and chaser, and stones. Boy, that's what you would call a screw-up. Raka, who was killed on the field of battle by Nimrod's guards. Raka, whose eyes whitened as the eyes of the blind and spoke with the voice of a dark one. I mean, I don't know. What have we got? The Linda Blair thing going on here or what? I don't know. Raka, whose dark ones changed his form so he became a different giant. Raka, who had eyes of certain death, so he bit it. His army was 425 giants. Well, I guess you could see that if you're going to go into a battle with other giants and you ain't all that good with your weaponry, yeah, I mean, that could make sense. Amok. Amok, who commanded the dark ones. All right. Amok, who could say, go and wound that giant, and the dark ones would go and wound him. They couldn't see it, folks. Amok, who commanded the dark ones from the high places, as Og stretched his arms over the field of battle. Amok, who said, Baal of the earth, delight in burnt offerings and sacrifices. Folks, this is right out of the freaking book of Deuteronomy and Leviticus. And get the idea when we get into the battle. Oh, wait till you see this. Behold, to open yourself up to the dark ones is greater than sacrifice. Well, that's the book of Isaiah right there. Obedience is preferred before sacrifice. To be connected to the dark one is better than the fat of the lambs. For your witchcraft, iniquity, and idolatry please your god Baal of the earth. Amok's army was 1,000 giants. Folks, this has got just, this goes deep. Deep. I mean, Yahweh, Baal, both demand and require flesh to be burnt, to be sacrificed, to be killed, death, blood, flesh. I mean, I don't care what your point of view or your particular theology is, you've got to recognize these facts. And again, it lends a lot of credence to the Phoenicians. In the manuscripts, the documents that they traded in, many times they were religious of nature. Where we know, in Canaanite, particularly Canaan, the Canaanites, they said Yahweh and Baal were brothers. Sounds like Enki and Enyo, doesn't it? Viroch the perfect, whose visage was beautiful and who received favor throughout the kingdom. Favor goes way back, doesn't it, folks? Even the giants knew about it. Because of his pleasant appearance. Viroch, servant of Baal of the sun. Viroch, who raided Nimrod's castle and rushed on the spoil and took sheep, oxen, and cattle and slaughtered them on the ground, and with his army ate them in the stores, blood, bones, and all. Viroch, who could call rocks and boulders to fall from the sky from Baal of the sun. Viroch, whose flowing flaxen hair became the easy target of the Nephilim, and he was severed in half after many wounds by a greater circumcised Nephilim. He had the eyes of certain death. No kidding. His army was 500 giants. You gotta let your mind begin to create these images. I mean, you can only imagine what that scene must have looked like. By the way, this field of battle, hundreds and hundreds of miles in its totality, and it was a field of battle. Idagun the possessed, Idagun whose dark ones would seize him and change his shape. That's a shapeshifter, folks. Idagun, who spoke unintelligibly because of the dark ones in him. Idagun, whose 7 braids had never been trimmed or cut. Idagun, servant of Mot, that's the god of the underworld. Idagun, who when the battle became intense and he was severely wounded by the archers, asked his army to run him through with his sword, screaming, lest these circumcised giants come to torture and abuse me. His army was 2,000 giants. Obviously, he had the eyes of death as well. Merahim, who had an extra arm growing from his chest that was useless. Merahim, who practiced the dark witchcraft of Baal of the earth that could change the species of any living beast. Now that's weird. He could change the species. Merahim, who foretold the coming of the great waters. Merahim, of whom the dark ones moved around and through, so much so that he appeared as a plague of locusts. Merahim, who cut his hair at the end of every 5 years because it was heavy and a burden upon him. Merahim, who had the eyes of death, and his army was 2,000 giants. Youcussed, whose skin and limbs were white as snow because he was a leper. Youcussed, whose hair had turned white on his sores, and the sores were deeper in the skin of him. Yuck. Youcussed, who worshiped Mot in secret. Youcussed, who with his fellow lepers beat drums at the time of infant sacrifices to Baal of the earth. Youcussed, who lived among the lepers near the trees where the dead are tied and the dark ones gather. Youcussed, who had the eyes of certain death. His army was 1,000 leprous and diseased giants. This is traits of human. I mean, it's just, Skybar. Skybar, the uninformed and stupid. Skybar, who spoke lies, the dark ones of the dark ones and the bright ones. Skybar, who spent inordinate amount of time grooming his beard. Skybar, who was beaten almost to death in the flatlands by his own Rephaim army. Hell, man, I mean, you're not Mr. Popular. Your own gang, man, is beating the crap out of you. Skybar, who was spared from betrayal and death at the hands of his army by Amok, the keeper of bodies before Baal. Skybar, who the uninformed and stupid, who dies delicately after one slap across the face from a circumcised Nephilim. Well, are you kidding me? I mean, what kind of snowflake is that? You get slapped and you die? Skybar, the confused who lied with all of his breath, for there were many who hated him and hated him with cruel hatred. They didn't only hate the dude, they hated him with cruelty. Man, talk about pissing off everybody. Skybars, whose corpse was circumcised on the field of battle by the Nephilim. Skybar's army, who wanted to kill him, was 50 giants. So let's just stop right here. This was the big thing. That's why the giants on the uncircumcised, the Rephaim, they wanted to make sure that they weren't going to be desecrated. And as we'll learn as we go further, they would do this sometimes while they were still alive to know that they were being marked into the afterlife. Yeah. Oryx, who had stared at the sun for revelation from Baal until he was blinded. Oryx, with long black hair, who Baal of the sun spoke directly to. Wonder if it was a flaming bush. Blind Oryx, who was carried into battle and commanded his army from his chase. Now, that's pretty far out, man. I mean, that's the way to go into battle. Oryx, who did call down fire from Baal of the sun upon the circumcised Nephilim on the field of battle. Oryx, who called upon Baal of the sun as his rock, fortress, and deliverer. Psalms 91, folks. Oryx, who spoke to Baal of the sun as his horn, his stronghold, and refuge, who trains him to deliver violence. Again, Psalms 91. Oryx, who worshipped both Baal of the sun and Baal of the moon, and opened himself to conflict with to the conflicted dark ones. I don't know. I mean, if you're already a dark one, how bad can it get for you when you're conflicted? Oryx, who had the eyes of death, and his army was 500 giants. Hoyo, the Blackruffian from the hot lands of elsewhere. Hoyo, the bread maker and worshiper of gods we did not know. Hoyo, whose dark ones could transport his spirit into another living creature. Man, Star Trek was way behind. They had transporters on the spiritual side of this that take physical matter. Hoyo, who attacked the Nephilim on the field of battle with his transportation. I have no freaking idea what that means. Hoyo, who raided the circumcised Nephilim's temples and ate the fat of their sacrifices and drank the blood of their drink offerings. This is exactly the Holy of Holies. Hoyo, who as dangerous and ferocious as he was strong. Hoyo, the fast, who had no use for weapons of the field of battle and used his hands to twist, thwart, and break the circumcised Nephilim. Hoyo, whose vengeance on the Nephilim was as grapes of gall on bitter clusters served with wine that was a cruel poison. Hoyo had the eyes of death, and his army was 500. This one, wow. Put your own thoughts to it, but folks, this is the deepest magic I've ever read. David Barry and many of you others, you've got many of the old books like I do in our libraries, our digital libraries. This is beyond anything I have read in there. This is beyond any demigod that supposedly Solomon had conquered. None represent this kind of power. None. And this was just an ordinary giant, a Rephaim. All right, Carranza. Carranza, the hairy blood drinker. Carranza, who wounded his enemies and saved their blood in clay pots. Carranza, worshiper of Baal of the earth. Carranza, who swung a dead circumcised Nephilim as a club on the field of battle. All right, Carranza, who was told of his early death by the smaller self-sorceresses. Carranza, who then turned his forehead to the stone and sacrificed 300 humans, smaller selves, to Baal of the earth, and was granted 100 more years of life. Think about that. I remember a passage that says, with long life, yeah. Carranza, who said to one of the Nephilim, why are you circumcised, giants? Fearful, O you of little faith, in Baal of the earth. O you of little faith? Carranza, who then arose and rebuked the circumcised Nephilim, and the ground opened and swallowed many, and he kept calm. Carranza, who had the eyes of certain death, and his army was 500 giants. Yeah, you add to what you want to on that one. Enceladus, the wealthy, strong potion maker, and servant of Baal of the moon. Enceladus, whose dark ones of rage overtook him when he was drunk. Enceladus, whose potions could chain a dark one in servitude to a Rephaim. Enceladus, whose potions caused the drinker to see the future. Enceladus, whose potions saved the Rephaim that ate the sour meat of the circumcised Nephilim as cooked by Stoechas. Enceladus, who, when not drinking wine, ate sacrificial meat and hated his wise and understanding heart bitterly for no reason at all. That's weird. Enceladus was the heaviest Rephaim on the field of battle. Enceladus, who drank a potion and prophesied the great waters. Enceladus, who was a drunkard and a glutton, and came to riches, and his drowsiness clothed him with gold. He didn't die. His army was 2,000 giants. potions that could change you, potions that could alter you. This is wild stuff, man. Typheus, I think is how that is. Typheus, yes. Typheus, broiler of meats and bread. So this guy was a cook. Typheus, who with Stoechas fed the armies of King Og. Typheus, who shaved his head after breaking a vow with Baal of the moon. Don't screw with the gods. Typheus, which none in all of Og's kingdom practice wickedness like him. What kind of freaking wickedness can be beyond wicked, right? Typheus, who never abstained from meat offered to Baal of the earth, moon, or sun. Typheus, who drank blood and essence of things strangled, and from things of spiritual connection from which you keep yourselves. Talk about having non-kosher meat, huh? Typheus, who ate the sacrificial bread, and he ate the dainty sacrificial meats served to him with the evil eye. And this goes way back, doesn't it? Typheus, who said, meats for the belly, and the belly for meats, but I shall destroy both it and them. Typheus, whose wickedness caused the dark ones to attach to him, so that he always smoldered as embers of fire. Wow. He apparently had the eyes of certain death, and his army was 500 giants. Wow. Well, you've heard about Stoechas now. Let's read about him. Stoechas, the stew maker, who spoke with the bright ones. Okay. Stoechas, whose eyes were blackened by all the vulgar in the world. Stoechas, who with Typheus fed the armies of Og. Stoechas, who when on the field of battle gave himself over to the dark ones. Stoechas, who fed upon the dead Nephilim and cooked their sour bodies for Og's army. Stoechas, who would only sacrifice an uncircumcised male, smaller self without blemish to Baal of the earth. And you know, I was thinking about the Incas, the Mesoamericans. Their culture was so rife with the spilling of human blood, human sacrifice. Yeah. Stoechas could call large fecal worms up from the ground to wrap, enter, and consume his enemies from Baal of the earth. Stoechas, who had eaten the food served by the bright ones, having their strange meat as a guest till his hand pushed the plate away. Stoechas' army was 2,000 giants. You get into this thing, and it opens up more questions than, you're getting information, because, wow, there's just a whole lot on this one. I mean, literally, we could spend 5-10 minutes on each one of these slides. This is Murdock of the shadows. Murdock, who stayed away from his fellow Rephaim and lived in caves. So this establishes they're well versed to cave dwelling. Murdock, who heard the distant cursed voices and obeyed their commands. Murdock, who was surrounded in a cloud of dark ones that covered him in the haze of Baal of the earth, which filled his cave. Murdock, whose prophecies were shunned because they were never good, but always darkness. Well, yeah, I mean, ain't going on that, dude. Screw that. Murdock, who covered himself in mud, and his hair was heavy with soil. Murdock, whose dark ones put a filth upon all they touched, and made them vile and set them as a gazing stock. Murdock, who had eyes of certain death. Yeah, another one bites the dust. You get that? All right. He had an army of 500. We'll do one more before we get out of this because we've got Athos. Now, Athos is an interesting one. Folks, dig this character. Athos, tormented, inheritor of Baal's kingdom. So there's an inheritor to Baal's kingdom. Athos, golden flesh, was pronounced with masculator. Athos, whose beauty could be summoned the loins of giants who weren't homosexuals. In other words, he could walk by and give them an erection. Athos, whose dark ones would lift him up and place him where he requested. Athos, whose flesh had touched any and all unclean things to inherit the kingdom of all. I don't know what the hell that could mean. I don't want to know. Athos, who conjured a lying dark one to confuse the ranks of the Nephilim. Athos, who did indeed fornicate and was a lover of males. Oh. Athos, who surrounded himself with male giants who loved him. Athos, whose behavior reminded the Rephaim of the unspoken mistake, so that he was disliked for it. Athos, who was a fornicator, a mocked idolater, effeminate, a thief, covetous, a drunkard, a reviler, a swindler, and was prophesied to inherit the kingdom of Baal. Well, I think, hell, he had all the requirements, met them all. Athos, who alone had the respect of King Og. Athos, who had eyes of certain death. Well, we never learned what happened to him, but apparently he died, and his army was 500 giants. So we had a gay giant, an inheritor of Baal's kingdom. Who would have thought? All right, we'll break it off there. We'll pick this back up on Monday, folks, because it just keeps on getting better. And yeah, is this just not the wildest thing ever? I mean, you get to know these characters. And I assure you, fellow free thinkers in this community of knowledge seekers, we will be one of the, how shall we say, well-versed. That's wild. I mean, is this not just the most amazing story? I mean, and we'll pick it up. We've got the rest of the Men of Renown. And when we get into the battle scene, you're going to remember these men because they play a role as this thing really gets intense. And I'm telling you, my mind has been there. I've meditated on this, and my mind has pictured this battlefield is beyond sometimes wording. It's unlike any battlefield we have ever even imagined. Hey, Big Al, how are you doing? Yeah, how about that? Couldn't we all use about another 100 years? Yeah. Big Al, it's good to see you, my friend. Darth, thank you. Yeah, they're all from mythology. Listen, we're giving memory to these giants now. I believe they're still here. I mean, listen, if they believed in an afterlife, by all indications, they said they taught us that because they ate us. We still don't like to factor that in. They ate us. We were a food stock. That's the whole conundrum in this whole history thing. It's just beyond. Well, thank you, Regina. That's very kind of you. Regina, appreciate that. It's wild, folks. Well, thank you. We'll pick up here on Monday. And as we go through this, I think it answers for me a lot of questions, but then of course it brings us, I mean, you talk about Yuval. He came from the heavens. He came from the sky. What does that mean? What does that imply? What does that say? Lots of stuff. Yes, Deborah, I think that, yeah, it does seem like a lot of the experiments of the gods, they had these supernatural powers. Powers that all humans would lust after. I dare say humans would sacrifice, if not they have sacrificed to obtain some of these powers. Powerful beings and these dark ones. I tell you what, love to hear your commentary on that. Michael says, I wonder if the battle is the same as the Hindu book of the Bhagavad. Yeah, listen. It would make, I don't know. I mean, now in the Hindu story, they were using laser weapons, but I don't know. What are you calling down fire from heaven? What is that? I mean, I don't know. There's one that they could actually transform himself, and whatever he touched sucked the life right out of you, or something like that. So, all right, folks, boy, I just went way over, but hey, this is just fascinating material. And yeah, we'll keep on. Have yourself a great, strong end of the week. I don't like to say weekend, but I know it's the weekend, but make it the strongest days of your week. Be on Sunday over on Jeff Doherty's channel, Christian Whistleblower. Tune in for us. I'm sure we're going to be talking a little bit about this. So appreciative of everyone. Thank you. Y'all are the best. And yeah, we'll continue. It gets more, how shall we say, wild. All right, folks, we'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.